It's a challenge for us all. But I'm glad you're good. I'm good though. I'm good. I'm good.
It definitely is a challenge. I mean, obviously after dealing with the whole protesting, the whole Black Lives Matter, obviously being there on Sunday, my emotions was just all over the place purely because of the fact that I was in awe at the turnout. I mean, obviously it's one thing seeing stuff on social media, seeing it online, but actually being in there to actually experience it and be around people that actually genuinely feel like they care, like they actually want to see change in the community in our country right now, living in the UK, living in London. And it was just a nice feeling, man. It was a nice feeling just to see so many different races just come under one, and understanding that what affects one of us affects all of us. And yeah, it was really shocking, but then, you know, I was just in awe to see the unity. But there's also, I had mixed feelings, as I said. It was also a bit sad that it's a shame that we can only come together like this when there's a crisis. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
When there's, it's like when there's, go
I wish this was the norm, right?
on.
And that people were engaging critically with our society and thinking about other people normally, not just because a really, really terrible thing happened at a time when everyone was at home. And obviously I'm talking about George Floyd, unable to pay attention to it, right? Because that kind of police brutality happens all the time, and it gets lost in the news cycle, and people don't look at it as much. But I think the combination of us being in a pandemic and having maybe a bit more time to actually digest what we're seeing in the news, focus on it, and the fact that there's a little bit less going on in other areas, meant that it's kind of all come together. What I hope is kind of what you're saying. I hope this is going to be a watershed moment, right? This is a change. This is the moment at which we decided to do things differently, not when we're all really busy and normal life, whatever that even is anymore, is back, then we won't care anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And exactly that, man. But yeah, we could talk about that all day. I wanted to talk about you.
I'm so glad you reached out and we connected, because I found I mean, I know we spoke the other day, but I found it really just amazing. So I'd love to do that.
Yeah, 100%. I like to because the thing about my show, I always like to make sure, yes, music is a major part of being a Represent Radio, and I love music. I would never ever use that, but I feel like when you're given an opportunity to be on such a prestigious platform like that, clearly you bring the A game. You're definitely one of the best out there. But then you also use your platform to seek other things that would matter to people, or maybe people may not have known about had you not shed light to it. So even for me now, I just wanted you to just tell us about your story and how you got started, the Make Renting Fair campaign, how that got started for you, what triggered it, really and truly. So yeah, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a journalist, obviously. And well, not obvious actually, not everyone would necessarily know that. I am a journalist. I'm not a campaigner or an activist. And I think that's a really important distinction to make, because the two get confused and mixed up often. And actually journalists have a very important role in our society.
Of course.
A lot of people don't necessarily understand exactly what we do, but the way I see it is we hold politicians to account, we hold powerful people to account, we tell the truth, we look at boring spreadsheets of numbers and make sure they're not lying when they're giving big statements to the country, a lot of which has been going on recently. So I am a journalist, and that's what I do, and I specialise in housing. And the Make Renting Fair campaign was a really interesting example of how experiences in my own life that I knew other people were having, I was able to use my platform and able to use the skills I have as a journalist to actually do something about it. So the campaign was to get letting fees banned in England. At the time, I was really broke. I was in a lot of debt, which I had racked up at uni, trying to roll with people who had a lot more money than me. And also renting, right? Because rent's really expensive, and I'd moved to I'm from South London originally. I'd moved to East London after uni with some uni mates, and my rent was really expensive, and I was taking out loans to pay it, trying to get into journalism. Not smart money moves, don't do that. But it got me where I am, I guess, in the end.
Yeah.
I was renting with my then boyfriend, and we got asked to pay I think it was over £2,000 in a deposit and fees.
Crazy. Yeah.
And I remember just being outraged. I was like, you what? 2,000? I don't have this money. So I emailed the letting agent. like as a journalist would do. I'm like, excuse me, could you please send me a breakdown of exactly what these fees are?
Yeah.
And they came back and that obviously they couldn't. And I was like, right, okay. I was livid. I was so angry. I was like, I'm going to research the hell out of this. Started like digging around. I was like, oh, letting fees are banned in Scotland and have been since 2012, but they're not in England.
Why is that?
Do something about
Yeah,
this.
of course.
So yeah, sat down with my editors at a magazine that no longer exists called The Debrief. It was wicked. RIP, we miss it a lot. But they were super supportive and they were like, yeah, let's do a campaign. So we like did loads of surveys of our readers, brought their voices together, did this petition, and I started interviewing politicians and asking them what they thought, getting various people on board. The Liberal Democrats were really helpful, Labour were really helpful, charities were really helpful, and somehow I ended up speaking at Conservative Party conference in Manchester on a panel of all men. Old men.
Was you intimidated?
Yeah, I was terrified.
Yeah, it must have been. Can only imagine.
Yeah, it was the first time I've done something like that. But I was like, I've got to do this. And I felt the pressure. Of like, there are 20 million renters in this country.
Wow.
I was like,
I didn't know that.
This is for all of them, right? So I spoke on that panel. I was really intimidated. And I think, and this is me like acknowledging my privilege here, because I'm white and I'm from the south of England, and I might not have like come from a wealthy background, but I potentially sound like I do. Like a Conservative minister might look at me and hear me speaking and relate to me, and I can advocate for myself. And the housing minister at the time was on that panel with me, and he's from Croydon, which is where my family are from. So we were like bonding over Croydon. And I think I just won him over, like by basically, I'm not a Conservative, but I think it's important to talk to people you don't agree with. And actually, like what that campaign had was the support of loads of people who are affected by this issue. But I was able to take that support and take those stories that I'd collected as a journalist and put them in front of the man who could do something about it.
Yeah.
And so on that panel, I thought I was going to have a stroke the whole time I was sitting there. couldn't feel my arms. I was like, am I dying?
Yeah.
But I obviously like made the point, and at the end he came over to me and he was like, oh, let's get a coffee and talk about this more.
Yeah. You hit the ground running. You received national press coverage. You had over 250,000 signatures on your petition. How did that feel to know that people were, they recognized what you're trying to do and they was supporting and they was on board? Because these are the people in questions that you're actually fighting for in those rooms. It
was the biggest privilege of my life so far, and the most humbling thing I have ever been part of to this date. And I hope it won't be the last time. But if it is, like, that's enough for me, because as a journalist, you are so aware that you have a platform and that you do have power, right? Up to a point. And I still feel that today in all my work. Like, I get paid to do this job, and that's great. And I'm so grateful for it. I never take it for granted. And in return, what I can do is keep advocating for other people. And it felt, I'm not sure I've even fully processed it yet. Like I have the piece of paper that's the law, the Tenant Fees Act, which is what came out of the letting fee ban. Sometimes I just like open the box that I've got it in and I look at it and I'm like, all those people who reached out to me with their stories, like, and me being able to put their stories out into the world and for people in power to read them, like they did that. And I'm just the like
spokesperson.
I'm like, the filter through which their stories go, and it's a privilege, and it's not something I ever take. I
wanted to run off some facts here that I kind of did on my research. So I found out that Section 21 of the 1988 Housing Act, it allows landlords to evict tenants without having to give them a reason. That's crazy. That's actually mad. I didn't know that act even existed. That's actually mad. But then also the Renters' Rights Bill, and just going through that, and these were the bill. The key focus of the bill is to ban these letting agents from charging tenants for registration fees, administration fees, inventory check fees, reference check fees, tenancy extension or renewal fees, and exit fees. Well, that's a lot of fees. That is a lot of fees. I just want to say thank you, because probably there's still a lot of people that still don't know about this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's like my life's work now, is like, how do we make sure they know about it? Because like, I really think that that's another role that journalists play, which is like, I want people to know they have these rights, because if you don't know and you don't challenge it, you're going to get charged. Like, I did a story recently about letting agents who are breaking the ban. Like, they can't charge you fees, it's illegal. Like, they could get fined for doing it. So I just want people to like get these messages, and to like, I know not everyone is a nerd like me and spends their time on a government website reading laws, but and I
it's
understand
good that. Yeah, it's good that you do. Yeah, it's good that you do, man. I love facts. I love factual information.
It's important. And on Section 21, for anyone who's listening, this is really important. 1988 Housing Act, year I was born, make of that what you will, like, I feel like my destiny. But it's a really important piece of legislation, because it's actually hugely responsible for the housing crisis that we're now in. And it made it a lot easier for landlords to be landlords and a lot harder for renters to function in the market. And that's Thatcherism. Like, Margaret Thatcher hated the idea that the state would like control the economy and that there should be free markets and capitalism should just do what it wanted. So she was like, let the landlords evict people easily, because then they're more likely to be landlords, because it'll be easier, their lives will be easier. So Section 21 is like a clause of that act, and what it means is your landlord can evict you at any time without giving you a reason. They don't have to give you a reason, they can just say get out. Now, that obviously is abused all the time. I write about this all the time. It's abused when people ask for repairs. It's abused when a landlord just doesn't like their tenant. Like, it can be really discriminatory as well. Like, for a landlord is a human being, which means they're flawed, which means they have prejudices. And Section 21 makes it much easier for them to just be like, oh no, like, get out. Because of the work of a woman who never gets shouted out, called Hannah Slater, who used to work at a lobby group, a campaigning group called Generation Rent. Section 21 is going to be banned. The government have committed to that. Yes, Hannah. But Brexit, COVID, it's been delayed. So right now, Section 21 still exists, and it can still happen. And if anyone who's listening like gets a Section 21 eviction notice, they should definitely like seek help from an organisation like Shelter. But it's worth noting, because obviously we're speaking still in the middle of a pandemic.
And I'm glad that you pointed that out and just made that people aware. I wanted to know at first, what were the struggles that you faced getting the campaign off the ground, off and running? I think that's kind of important, because how we can paint it is just like, obviously you're in a position to use your journalistic skills to get it off and running, and obviously white privileges, and get through the door. But what struggles did you face to trying to get this abolished? So
a lot, right? Like, it was a lot. I'll run through some of them. Like, don't want to like dwell on this too much and make it about me, but the toll on my mental health was pretty big. Being exposed in that way to the world, in a way that I'd not really been before, because like my face was seen by so many people, and like doing lots of TV and radio, which now I'm used to, but like, it was a lot. And it definitely changed me as a person. And like, the times, like, obviously I'm privileged in many ways, namely being white, but like, I am a woman, and like, women are given a pretty hard time in the media. And the Times ran this article about me, and like, I had a big picture in my face, and it talked about my dad in a way that was like inaccurate. And that's not like the worst. Like, some of my colleagues have had like hit pieces on them in the Daily Mail, which is horrible, and like, it wasn't that bad, but it was just very exposing. And that was a struggle for me, because I'm a very private person, and like, I love my job, but my job is to talk about other people, right? And that then suddenly people were talking about me, and like, that was a big shift. But beyond that, like, and it was worth it, by the way, and I'd do it again 1,000 times. But beyond that, like, finding the time, the energy, and I totally understand how like people who are activists right now championing like civil rights or other, you know, trans rights, another issue that's been like so big this week. I know how draining that can be because you are arguing for something that should be the case already, and it takes a toll. And I was very fortunate, like it wasn't a financial burden for me because I was able to do it as part of my job as a journalist, and my editors were super supportive of that. But I know a lot of people campaign unpaid, right? And I can, like I guess if you broke down my salary during that year and the hours that I worked, probably I didn't get paid a lot, but like that, those were the main challenges. And I think anyone who puts themselves out there to talk about stuff, politics, like race, gender, whatever, class, you are putting yourself up for scrutiny, and it's a lot.
You have to be very, very brave, and also just understand that this is the world where everything's just free flowing, man. People can write a piece on you and it may not necessarily be true, but because they have the power to do that, they can. They actually can. I definitely wanted to point this out as well. You're a worker, you're very busy, and there's something else that I know that you do take on as well, which is you're also part of another petition. And that is I Am a Criminal campaign that was launched by Refinery 29. And it's aimed at abolishing clauses 58 and 59 of the 1967 Act surrounding abortion. Now, how did you get involved in that? And what is your role in particular? And how is the progress on that? How is that progressing? Are these clauses going to be abolished?
Another really important issue. So my areas of specialism as a journalist are housing and like women's health broadly. And abortion obviously is a huge part of women's health. 1 in 4 women and people who identify as women and people with wombs will have an abortion. I think it's by the age of 40 in this country. So it's like very common. And it's absolutely a human right. It's acknowledged to be one. And there are many reasons why people do it. So I've always reported on abortion because it hasn't been legal that long in this country, since 1967. That's pretty recent, right? We forget sometimes how far we've come in such a short space of time. So no wonder we're still having difficult conversations as a society and as human beings with one another. But yeah, I've reported on abortion a lot. And over the years, I started to see that, because my job is to, like I said, look at laws, look at policy, and talk about how they affect people, and use people's stories to demonstrate the impact that they're having. And the 1967 Abortion Act is a really important piece of legislation, and that's why women can access abortion. But when it was made law in the 60s, there was a lot of opposition to it. People did not want it to happen. I've written about the history of this too. And basically what they did was that they made it quite restrictive. So 2 doctors have to sign off, as though a woman can't like make a decision. 2 doctors have to say that decision is valid. Abortion can only happen at certain registered premises, even though the World Health Organization say that for an early abortion, the pills that you take are the safest medication out there. Like you could take them at home and that would be fine. But when you're taking them at a doctor's surgery or whatever, and then you've got to go home after you've taken them, you might already be feeling effects. Like that's inhumane. So the campaign is about undoing those clauses that mean that that's the case. And the reason they exist, and this is wild, and this is why I just like encourage everyone to pay attention to everything around them. Those clauses exist because abortion was illegal because of a thing called the 1861 Offences Against the Person Act, a Victorian law written in Victorian times that means that a woman who ends a pregnancy has committed a crime and could go to prison. When they brought in the 67 Act, they didn't undo the Victorian law because that was controversial. They just tacked the new law onto it. So that law still exists. So technically, abortion is still a criminal issue. It's legal to access, but that law is underpinned by another law. And that feeds into stigma and shame. And it's like, that's why we have to talk about it and just get rid of the old law. That's not relevant anymore. Like, move it on. So that's what that campaign is. It was making great progress, amplifying the work of so many other people, the British Pregnancy Advisory Service, Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and some women MPs who've been like campaigning on this for a long time. I was like bringing all that together in one place. But then the pandemic happened, and we were going to have an event at Parliament in May, but obviously that got postponed. So as soon as I'm allowed, I'm going to rearrange that and get all those people together in that room and try and I'm going to email Boris Johnson and be like, you're going to come to this.
Great.
And just
just let me know. I'd definitely love to come through as well.
I'd love that. Yeah, I would really love that. Please do. That would be great. And maybe he'll come as well. That would be great, wouldn't it?
I know, right? That would be great. I wanted to ask you as well. This is a particular question, but I feel like it's very validated. It's very current due to the current times that we're in right now. Is the UK racist? And if so, why?
This is such an important question, and I'm glad it's getting asked. And obviously the UK is racist. But I think the question the questions are important, but they can distract you from the answer. And I think this question is one of those, right? Because it invites a yes or no answer. Yes, UK is racist. No, it's not. And I think what we saw this week was Boris Johnson being like, no, obviously it's not racist. And Rishi Sunak, our Chancellor, saying, oh, I've experienced a bit of racism, but no, I don't think this country is racist. Mm-hmm. And actually, it is. So let's talk about why it is. Mm-hmm. And that is about structural inequality. And it's about, and I'm sorry, this is a difficult thing for some people to hear, a bit of a trigger warning, it's because our country got really, really rich off of slavery. We have to acknowledge that. White people have to get comfortable talking about that. That was ended in the 1860s, just over 100 years ago in the grand scheme of time. We're not talking about a huge period. There are still people in this country who are rich because they were working for companies who enslaved other people. I'm a housing specialist, so I suppose I can talk about this from a housing perspective. There are companies who made money because of slavery. The Bank of England, RBS, Royal Mail, lots of insurance companies. They have wealth because of that, right? We ended slavery, rightly, but we didn't do anything about that wealth, the money that they profited from the exploitation of people. A lot of those companies, let's take the insurance companies, they invest in the property market, right? Mm-hmm. That money is still making certain people rich at the expense of other people. Mm-hmm. So when we ask this question, is the UK racist? I think it's really important to talk about why and to talk about the history of why. And I think for me, obviously housing is my focus and that's just one aspect of it. And I know that, for instance, if you're Black, you're more likely to live in overcrowded accommodation. It's just a fact. 36% of homeless people in this country are not white. Mm-hmm. We have to talk about that. That's also structural racism and structural inequality. Mm-hmm. And I worry that when we say what that question this week has distracted everyone into being no, I'm not racist. No, I'm not racist. But really, we need to talk about the systems. We need to talk about money. We need to talk about inequality. Yeah. So that would be my answer. Yes. 100%.
100%. And I'm just even tagging on from that as well, just from personal experiences that I've experienced. So in 2018, I experienced racial profiling from a police officer, and I was heading over to my other radio station at the time. And it was kind of weird for me because of the fact that I hadn't been stopped in such a long time, but it was under a law that I don't think anyone had ever heard of. So I got interviewed by the BBC Newsbeat, iNews. It went viral all over Twitter and Instagram, etc., etc. And it was under a law called the Stop and Account law. So I got stopped, but I had to account for a reason as to why I'm at Paddington Station. And I just thought that was completely preposterous. I was thinking, are you being serious right now? I have to tell you the reason why I'm at a public station? Why else do people come to stations? Is it not to go to another location? And it's just a passerby for them to get to their destination. So I just felt like at that point in time, that's when I would say my eyes were open more so because of the fact that I'd never experienced that. Not that I felt threatened, I just felt disrespected as such. Because I looked around just to see if there was anyone else, because I thought I was in a movie. So I looked around to see if there's anyone else that they may have stopped, or is there someone else that you're going to ask to account for their presence at a station. That never occurred. I'm glad it did what it did because it made me realize that, the UK is racist. And for a long time, I probably didn't feel like it was because of the fact that I hadn't experienced what I experienced at the time. And it was just very interesting and a weird feeling. But I think for me now, I've understand that, okay, I can only police myself and how I move and how I decide to treat and act in certain situations. I'm not going to antagonize. I'm not going to get irate because I feel like anger is not the best response to this. I think for me, it's just to be smart and just to be like, all right, cool. Understand, as long as this doesn't happen quite often to me and anyone else, if I can shed light on something like this, then I would. And I did. And it did what it did. And I wasn't expecting that, but I'm glad it did happen because it made people aware that there's a law out there that says stop and account, and you have to account for your presence here. But then how many people who have my skin tone does that law apply to? Because if I was white, would you stop and ask me to account for my presence here? And it was just very interesting. And it was an experience that I will never, ever forget. I never told my mom about it, but she, obviously the news being the news, she saw it and she was like, how did I feel? And I was like, I was angry at the time, but I'm so far okay from it now.
I'm so sorry that happened, and like, thank you for sharing it with me. And I think like the fact that you've shared it, you know, not just with me, but like with all these people and other journalists, and that will raise awareness, and that's really important. And like, you know, I think we're living through history right now, and I really hope the momentum from the protests in the last few weeks continues, because what you're talking about is like, that is structural racism, institutional racism in action. I'm white. That's never happened to me. I'm pretty sure it never will. And that's not okay. And I know as a white person, there are like things that I maybe don't see or can't see and will never experience. And yeah, I'm really sorry, and thank you for sharing it. And like,
it's fine. It's absolutely fine.
Sharing it with so many people as well. And like, we have to find ways to talk about this stuff.
We have to talk about it, and people should not be uncomfortable about it, because you can see with your own eyes what's happening and what's going on and out in the world. Everyone reads the news the same as everybody else, and I think even though you may not fully understand about it, you can be empathetic, you can be sympathetic, because you can see with your own eyes how a certain race is being treated just by the skin of their tone, and that is unacceptable, and that needs to stop, because I'm human as much as anyone else.
And I think what we have seen in the last week is, you know, people are coming together and protesting or learning, reading, accessing resources, asking questions, challenging their family members, you know. And it's like, we have to normalize talking about race and racism, and white people have to start talking about it too, otherwise nothing will change. Like, I feel, I'm not comparing it, but I do feel this about sexism and gender discrimination too. Like, when the Me Too movement kicked off, I felt very strongly so many women, myself included, were being asked to tell their stories about sexism, about sexual assault. Important, but the emotional labor of telling those stories takes a toll. There are things that I've been through that I don't talk about publicly, because the emotional labor of doing it is like almost traumatizing, right? And I remember writing a piece that loads of people got very angry at, but I was like, where are the men in Me Too? I'd love men to start talking and be like, sexism's wrong. Don't rape women, like, shock. So I hope we can learn from that. And sort of stay galvanized and keep moving forward together and talk about race, and be like, you know, white people have to talk about racism and they have to examine their behavior, because otherwise the people who are most affected by racism are doing all the work, and that's not okay. So I hope that's like a lesson that can be learned from how effective Me Too was in the end as a movement. And again, I'm not comparing them or conflating them, because I've seen that a few times this week, and I think, no, let's keep them separate. But what has happened as a result of Me Too is culture change, and that's because the pressure was kept on. So I just hope we can keep coming together and like approaching each other with compassion and understanding, and like with open minds. To have difficult conversations.
Of course,
that's the only way it will change.
Last few points. Your book, when is that coming out? What's the title of it? What is there anything you could tell us about it as well? Like, what's it going to be based on? So
my brain's been pregnant with this book for a long time.
I love the analogy.
About 3 years, but it's coming out hopefully in January. It was supposed to be May this year, but I had to delay it because I was really busy, basically, and writing books is really hard. But then obviously the pandemic happened, so I've had to rewrite quite a lot of it. Like, lockdown has been a bit hectic for me because I've actually been working and rewriting my book.
Busybody.
To like update it, because the coronavirus and the housing crisis, I mean, it's exposed the injustices, the inequalities, the problems we had, like in a big way. But it should be out next year. It's called Tenants, Stories of Britain's Housing Shame. And, you know, it's really continuing on the work that campaign did. It's I wrote it and I'm the author, and like I'm here to talk about it, but it only exists because people all over this country have let me into their homes and told me their stories, and it's their book. Like, I'm just the filter through which their stories are going to get out into the world, and I hope that I'll do them justice and like bring about more change.
I hope so too. Thank you so much, Vicky. What songs are you listening to right now? Because this is a radio station, so we want to hear Vicky Spratt's favorite kind of song right now that she would love to hear. So what are you listening to? And let me see if we have it on Represent so we can play it for you next.
So right now, I have a very eclectic music taste normally, but throughout lockdown, Charlie XCX has actually got me through. Like, I've become completely obsessed with her, and she made an album in quarantine at home, like without a studio, at the start of lockdown, and released it. Like, she's a complete workaholic, but I'm here for it.
Okay. What's the name of the song?
There's a song on that called Anthems. And like, all I want to do right now, I miss my friends so much, and like I miss dancing. And I mean, I'm a bit old now, so I don't go to raves as much as I used to. But there's a line in this song Anthems which is like, I just want to go to parties and feel the heat from all the bodies. Okay. That's all I want. I just want to like stand on a dance floor and be surrounded by people. So I keep listening to that song Anthems and just like dancing around my flat.
Well, hopefully the way things are going on right now, we can have a few parties this summer, the way things are going. So that will be absolutely fun. And I would probably just send you some new music as well that I feel like you might like as well. The content that has been released during quarantine has been quite good as well. So it'd be nice to get your points and what you feel about the music.
Send me a mixtape. I would love that.
I will do. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. You're amazing, and keep doing the great things that you do and the great work that you do.
Right back at you. It's honestly, like, I've loved talking to you, and it's such a pleasure, and like I think you're amazing, and just keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
See ya. Bye.